I ironed my best blouse for a house I was not welcome in. That was the thought that snagged like a loose thread as I folded the warm cotton on my lap and smoothed the cuffs with my palm, the way I used to do for Mark's school shirts when he was small and believed every collar made him a little braver. I am Evelyn, 72, knees that complain at every step and fingers that remember recipes, even when the head forgets where it put the spectacles. Tomorrow, the movers were supposed to arrive at 8. We were finally going to the new place. Mark and his wife Laura had signed all the papers last week, and the agent had phoned me to confirm the elevator was spacious and the building allowed small pets, because I still keep the urn of my late husband's terrarium snails on the windowsill like a ridiculous secret. It was going to be a fresh start, a 2-bedroom apartment near the park, the kind of place where a woman can walk safely at dusk, where the sun lies across the floorboards like a cat. I sold my little flat to help with the down payment. It will be all of ours, Mark had said, touching the back of my hand with that absent pat he uses when he is half thinking about something else. You'll finally have a proper room. Proper. That word lived in my chest like a small lamp. I spent weeks sifting through drawers, keeping only what sparks a memory sharp enough to justify the space. The chipped sugar bowl from our first anniversary dinner, the crochet blanket I made during the winter when the boiler died and we all slept in sweaters, the wedding photo where my husband looks like he just stole me from a train. I packed my life into 8 boxes and 1 stubborn suitcase whose handle sticks unless you talk sweet to it. The night before the move, I cooked a pot of lentil soup because I imagined us too tired to do anything but ladle and chew. I put on a fresh tablecloth, set out 3 bowls, and waited for them to return from the new place where they'd gone to measure curtains. The clock did its old tick-tock like a nervous ant. When they finally came in, Mark dropped his keys into the ceramic dish with a clatter that made me flinch. He looked like a boy who had played too long outside, dust on his shoes, excitement in his eyes, the good kind of sweat on his forehead. Laura walked straight to the sink, washed her hands as if she wanted to erase fingerprints, and took the towel from its hook like it had offended her. "You cooked," she said, not turning. "It smells heavy." I laughed a little, tried to make my voice light. "It's the cumin. It likes to arrive before I do." "We already ate," she said. Mark started to say something, then stopped. I ladled my soup back into the pot, let the spoon rest there like a boat that had nowhere to go. "Come sit anyway," I said. "Tell me about the light in the living room. Did we guess right about where it hits?" Laura dried her hands slowly, carefully folding the towel into a perfect rectangle, as if precision could make the next words kinder. "About tomorrow," she began, and the lamp in my chest flickered. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." I looked at Mark. He looked at the fruit bowl. "What misunderstanding?" I asked. "About your room," Laura said. "About you moving in." The spoon in the pot sank with a soft plop. "There's no misunderstanding," I said. "We discussed this for months. I sold my place. The boxes are ready. I bought curtains with little leaves for the window, remember?" Laura inhaled through her nose, that fitness class breath that always sounds like it comes with instructions. "Evelyn, it's not suitable. The building has strict rules about long-term guests. And our mortgage application, well, it's complicated when there are multiple households. The bank needs clarity." "I am not a guest," I said. My voice had an edge I didn't plan. "I am Mark's mother." "Exactly," she replied. And something about the way she said it felt like a sticker being peeled off a jar. Slow, careful, final. "And Mark is my husband. We're starting our life properly now. We need space." I looked at my son, The boy who once hid the broken blue marble in his sock drawer because he felt sorry for it. He rubbed his eyebrow with his thumb, a habit he has when he's grading papers. "It's not that we don't want to help," he said softly. "It's just, Laura's right. The paperwork is messy." Paperwork. The word hung between us like a thin rope over a drop. "The agent called me," I whispered. "He said the second bedroom would be perfect for me to sit and knit and listen to the birds." I asked him about the elevator. He asked if my cat was quiet. He spoke to me like I belonged. Laura opened the cupboard and took out a glass, then closed it again because it wasn't the glass she wanted. "We never told him you were moving in," she said. "I'm sorry if you assumed." It was the "you" that hurt, as if they were both on one side of the table, and I had wandered by accident into someone else's kitchen. I reached for the chair back because my knees forgot themselves for a second. "I gave you the money," I said, trying to make it a question, but it came out like a statement made by a very old woman to a suddenly very young room. Mark's face flushed. "We know," he said, "and we're grateful. You'll stay here for a bit until we sort things out. Then we'll help you find something." "Find something?" The laugh slipped out before I could stop it. It sounded like a cup put down too hard. I found something 30 years ago. I found family. I found a way to be useful. Did I misplace it? Laura's lips tightened. "This is exactly what I mean," she said, and now her voice had gained confidence, like a person who realizes the crowd is on her side. "Evelyn, you make everything emotional. We are talking logistics. Do you know how humiliating it is to admit to the building manager that we have a dependent? People gossip. We need to look stable." Humiliating. The word went through me like a cold spoon. I thought of the blouse folded on my lap upstairs, of the pans scrubbed to a shine no one but me would notice, of the little note I had already written to tape to my door at the new place. "Please, delivery man, ring twice, old ears," and how ridiculous it would look in a drawer. I stood straighter, surprised to discover I still knew how. "If anyone needs to be humiliated," I said evenly, "it won't be me." Mark shoved his hands into his pockets like a teenage boy. "Mom," he murmured, warning and plea in one syllable. I turned off the soup. The kitchen went very quiet, the way rooms do when you remember they can survive without you. "I'll sleep here tonight," I said calmly, "and tomorrow I'll go to the new place to give the movers the correct address for my boxes." Laura widened her eyes, incredulous. "There is no space for your boxes at the new place." I smiled in a way that felt like I had just found a spine I'd lent to someone, and they never returned. "Then we'll use the space my money bought," I replied. She went white and then red. "You can't speak to me like that," she hissed. "You are a guest in this house until we decide otherwise." Guest. Decide. I felt something align inside me, like books finally going back to the right shelf. I walked to my room and closed the door, gently because my mother taught me to save the slams for when you need them. On the bed waited the folder the notary had given me when I sold my flat. I had tucked inside it every receipt, every bank transfer slip, the photocopies the agent had made me sign. I took them out and laid them on the quilt like tarot cards. There, among the brittle papers and the careful stamps, was a single white envelope with my name in the agent's quick handwriting. I had forgotten he'd given it to me yesterday, just in case you want to double-check wording before the keys are released, he'd said. I slid out the page and read, "Confirmation of contribution agreement." My heart knocked once, hard. Under the neat paragraphs was a line I hadn't noticed before, added after Laura left the office early to take a call. "Second bedroom to remain available for the use of Ms. Evelyn Clark for an indefinite period, to be reviewed annually." It was signed by Mark, and by Laura. I pressed my finger to the ink. The lamp in my chest brightened. From the other side of the door came Laura's voice, sharper now, low and fast to Mark, a string pulled tight. "Tomorrow, make sure your mother doesn't embarrass us," she said. "I don't want the neighbors thinking we're bringing baggage." I folded the paper, slid it back into the envelope, and placed it in my handbag next to my keys. Then, for the first time in a long while, I put my shoes neatly by the bed, not because I was afraid to trip in the night, but because I intended to stand very firmly in them in the morning. I woke before the birds and lay very still, measuring the room in the dark like a seamstress who knows the fabric will fight back. The house had that early morning hollowness of a place that expects something to happen to it. I dressed in the blouse I'd ironed, buttoning it slowly, letting each small click be a thought. I am not a guest. I am not a burden. I am not an afterthought. When I opened the door, the hallway smelled of last night's arguments and the cumin that refused to apologize. Mark was already awake, sitting at the table with his laptop open and his shoulders rounded in that apologetic way that makes him look like a question mark. Laura came in from the bedroom, rolling a tape measure back into its metal stomach. "You should stay out of the way today," she said, as if she were warning me about wet paint. "Movers work best when there's no interference." I set my handbag on the chair with the quiet authority of someone placing a pawn with a plan. "I'll be where my boxes are," I said, "and my boxes are going where my money went." Her mouth twitched. "We'll see." It's a terrible thing when a small phrase can turn into a key that locks you out of your life. The movers arrived with voices that sounded like they'd been taught to be cheerful, even for people whose sofa doesn't fit through the door. I stuck a paper on each box, bedding, kitchen, frames, so no one could pretend they didn't know which life they were lifting. Laura tried to hand the crew chief a folded sheet with an alternative address scribbled on it. "Storage first," she said. I coughed, not because my throat needed it, but because the moment did. "That won't be necessary," I told the crew chief, and handed him the envelope from the notary, my finger tapping the paragraph that had slept under my pillow. He read, glanced between us like a referee who hates whistles, and nodded. "We deliver as per this instruction, ma'am." Laura's eyes became glassy and hard. "You are being dramatic," she said. "You're making strangers part of our family matters." "My family made me a stranger," I replied, and it was not dramatic at all. The journey to the new building felt like a procession held in secret. I sat in the front of the van because I get carsick in the back, and because I wanted to arrive in my day, not be delivered to it. When we pulled up, the building looked exactly as it had in the pictures. Pale brick with windows that blinked morning light, planters with patient ferns, a lobby with a chandelier that pretended it had always been there. The manager stood at the desk, a woman my age with hair cut in a sensible bob, and the sort of posture that announces, "I have seen every kind of story and I keep a pen ready." Her name tag said, "Mrs. Novak." "Welcome," she said. Her eyes flicked to my boxes, then to my face, and something warm passed between women who have packed more than belongings. Laura strode to the desk and rested both palms on it, her wedding ring a tiny sun. "We're Unit 4B, she declared. "We discussed move-in rules. We are the proprietors." The word we came out like a gate snapping shut. "And this is?" Mrs. Novak asked gently, nodding toward me. Laura didn't look at me. "My husband's mother," she said. "She's only here temporarily to supervise the movers." The way some people say supervise is the way others say infest. "We have a strict long-term residency policy," Mrs. Novak said, "which your file acknowledges." She pulled up a document on her screen. I could feel the shape of my name before I saw it. There is also an addendum. Her finger traced the paragraph like a hymn. Laura leaned forward, the way you lean over a pot and hope the soup will change if you glare at it. Mark stood to the side, statuesque with regret. This must be a mistake, Laura said, and the lobby tile recorded the ambition in her tone. We never agreed to a dependent living with us. That will affect our privacy and our impression among neighbors. The addendum is signed by both title holders, Mrs. Novak replied, and it uses the word indefinite. We do not alter signatures after keys are issued. I opened my handbag and removed the original paper, sliding it toward her like an old spell that still knows its magic. Here is my copy, I said, in case the screen tries to forget. She took it, compared, and gave it back to me with the small nod of a professional who respects ink. A man with a dog came through the door. The dog gave my ankle a polite sniff and wagged in agreement with the universe. Nevertheless, Laura pressed on, turning to the movers, place the boxes in the storage room until further notice. We'll sort family matters privately. The crew chief looked at me. I looked at him. 4B, I said. He moved. Sometimes authority is only the refusal to echo a lie. In the elevator, Laura hissed, "You're sabotaging us." The word us bounced against the mirrored walls and came back wearing different faces. I'm unpacking, I said. If that's sabotage, the house needed it. The doors opened on a hallway that still smelled faintly of new paint and dust, ambition and beginnings. 4B had a red ribbon tied to its handle like a joke about presents. Inside, sunlight laid itself across the floors, exactly where I had imagined. The living room had a confident window. The second bedroom, the one with the little leaves curtains in my bag, waited like an empty teacup. Laura went room to room, snapping photos with her phone, as if proof could bend reality. We will revisit this with the bank, she announced. They can nullify clauses that create risk. Banks nullify overdrafts, I said. They do not nullify mothers. Mark laughed once, a sound that died quickly, then rubbed his eyebrow. Mom, please, he whispered. We can't fight in front of the building. We're not in front of the building, I said. We're inside the life I paid for. One of the movers called from the hall. Where do the frames go? Second bedroom, I answered, and Laura spun so fast the ribbon on her ponytail made a sound. No, she said sharply, stepping in front of me. Those are not going in there. Her voice grew louder, brittle, public. Do you hear me? You don't get to plaster your dead past on our fresh walls. You are here as a... She stopped herself, but the word had already started down the hallway like a rumor. As a what? I asked quietly. The mover held his breath. Mark stared into the sink as if it might swallow him up if he wished hard enough. Laura's chest rose and fell. As a courtesy, she said, but the word you could tell she'd chosen not to say, burden, hung in the air like a moth by the light. I picked up the box labeled frames and carried it into the second bedroom, feeling the weight of glass and time. Careful, the crew chief said automatically, and I smiled, because careful is the one thing I have practiced more than any other art. I set the box on the floor, crossed to the window, and pulled the tape from the leaves curtains. They unfurled with a small sigh, then caught the light like they had been invited. This is not happening, Laura said behind me, her voice trembling in that particular way cruelty trembles when it senses an audience turning. You are humiliating me. I turned, and I do not know what my face was doing, but it made her step back. I didn't write the word indefinite, Hen, I said. You did. My hands shook, so I occupied them. I hung the small picture first, the one of Mark at 8, with jam on his cheek, because beginnings deserve witnesses. Then I placed the crochet blanket at the foot of the bed frame someone had assembled too tightly, so it squeaked like a mouse praying. The movers brought my chair and my lamp and the sugar bowl with the tiny chip that looks like a grin. Each piece found its place, as if rooms remember small loyalties. Mrs. Novak knocked on the open door and cleared her throat. "Welcome, Ms. Clark," she said, and her use of my name felt like a stamp. "We have a residence WhatsApp group. Someone will add you. We exchange plant cuttings and warnings about the elevator when it gets moody." Laura gave a bright, brittle laugh. "She won't need that," she said. "This arrangement is temporary." Mrs. Novak lifted one eyebrow, the international sign for we both know what indefinite means. "Of course," she said neutrally. "Meanwhile, Ms. Clark, if you require a nameplate for the mailbox, submit it at the desk by Thursday. We engrave on Fridays." A nameplate. It was such a small word you could carry it in your pocket and forget it until you needed proof that you existed. I imagined my name in neat letters, not shouting, just living there between the takeout menus and the electricity bills. "Thank you," I said, and my voice surprised me by sounding young. Laura inhaled sharply, outraged at the world for failing to bend. Mark came to the doorway, his hands empty, his mouth full of things he couldn't say. "Mom," he tried again, softer. And for a second I saw the boy who once begged me to sit in the front row of his school play so he could look at me when he forgot his lines. "This is hard. Hard things last," I said. "That's how we know they matter." And just then my phone buzzed inside my handbag. It was the bank's push notification. A polite little rectangle on the screen. New transfer posted. I tapped it open, frowning. A large sum had left the account last night. The hour matched the time. "Do you know anything about this, Mark?" He blinked, and for a moment I saw pure confusion in his face. But then Laura stepped forward, her voice sharpened. "It's nothing you need to concern yourself with. We're handling things. You've already involved yourself enough." "Handling things?" I repeated, feeling my knees steady though my heart was drumming. "With my money?" Mark looked at her quickly. "Laura, what did you do?" She didn't flinch. "I secured us flexibility. The bank was dragging its feet, and I won't live in uncertainty, so I arranged a bridge loan. It's temporary." "From a private lender?" I asked. "Do you have any idea what those terms are like? Interest that eats through savings like moths through wool. And you used money that wasn't yours to move." "It was ours," she shot back. "You gave it freely. You said it was for the new place, for all of us. Well, this is what it takes to keep a roof over our heads." I stood up slowly, smoothing the creases in my blouse. "No, I said it was for a home, a place with room for family, for trust, not for secrets written in fine print." Mark's face was pale now. He stared at Laura, but she looked only at me, defiant, like someone daring the wind to blow harder. "You've lived your life already," she hissed. "You've made your mistakes. Let us live ours without your judgment." Something inside me snapped, not loudly, but like a thread giving way. "I didn't give you this money so you could buy yourselves distance from me. I gave it because I believed we were building something together, and if you've tied us to some lender who'll come knocking at our door in the night, then you haven't just betrayed me. You've betrayed your husband, too." Mark swallowed hard, finally speaking, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard. "Laura, is this true? Did you sign something I don't know about?" She said nothing, and in her silence, the whole truth filled the room. I walked to the window, pulled back the new leaf-patterned curtains, and let the sunlight in. The light touched the box of frames on the floor, waiting for me to hang them. The photo of Mark at 8 years old, jam still on his cheek, seemed to stare up at him from inside the cardboard. "Mark," I said softly, "do you remember that summer day when you fell from your bike and thought your leg was broken? You cried, and I carried you all the way home. You were heavy, but I didn't stop, because mothers don't put their children down halfway." He nodded, wordless, his eyes fixed on the box. "Well," I continued, "this is the same. I'm not putting you down now, even if your wife thinks I should. I'm standing here in this home, and I will not be erased." Laura made a small, sharp sound, half laugh, half snarl. "You can't scare me with sentimental stories. This is our marriage, our house. You are just extra." But she was wrong. I wasn't extra. I was essential, like the unseen beams that hold up a roof until someone forgets they're there. And now, with proof in my hands and her silence exposing every secret, I felt something shift. The paper in my bag was more than a clause. It was a weapon. And the transfer on my phone was more than a number. It was a trap she had built for herself. I turned back toward her, my voice steady, almost calm. "Then I suppose it's time I remind you whose name is written into these walls, not as a guest, not as a courtesy, but as a resident, with no expiry." Laura's lips parted, but no words came. And Mark finally lifted his head and said, barely above a whisper, "Mom's right." The air between us crackled, fragile and dangerous, as if the whole apartment were listening to decide which side it belonged to. Mark's whisper, "Mom's right," hung between us like a bell that had finally been struck, and the sound of it changed the shape of the room. Laura's jaw tightened, a small muscle fluttering near her ear, the kind of twitch a person gets when they're calculating a retreat disguised as a victory. She snatched her phone and began typing with those fast, chopping gestures that make every message look like a scolding. I did not move. I let the light continue to spill over the floorboards and reached for the box labeled papers, sliding it closer with my foot as if I were drawing courage across the room. "We're going to the bank," I said to Mark, and heard how simple sentences can be more powerful than speeches. "Now." He nodded, almost grateful to be given instructions again, like the boy who once followed my breadcrumb notes to find his birthday present. Laura laughed without humor. "You won't get far," she said. "Everything is already arranged. It's legal." That word, legal, can make cowards of good people. I slipped the addendum back into my handbag and picked up my coat. "Then we'll confirm that," I answered, in front of someone who knows what papers mean. The elevator gave a soft complaint as it descended, like an old aunt telling you she's coming along whether you like it or not. In the lobby, Mrs. Novak looked up with the polite interest of a guardian who recognizes the posture of a family taking their thunder outside. "Do you need a taxi?" she asked. "It's a short walk," I said. Short walks stiffen the spine. Outside, the day had decided to be generous. Crisp air, a sky washed clean, the kind of weather that makes even bad news arrive on time. Mark kept pace with me, hands jammed into his pockets, eyes on the pavement, and after half a block he said very quietly, "I didn't know about the transfer." The words were thin from being kept in too small a space. "I believe you," I said, "but believing you won't untie the knot she's made." He swallowed. "She says I'm soft when it comes to you." "Softness isn't weakness," I said. "Sometimes it's the only reason a house stands when the wind passes through." At the bank, the carpet smelled like cold coffee and policy. A young man in a suit that still had store creases led us into a glass cubicle where conversations pretend to be private. His name tag said Ben. I placed the phone on the table. The transfer opened like a wound. "We need to understand this," I said. "A prepayment clearance to a private lender, not our mortgage bank." Ben typed. The keyboard made the same juddering sound my sewing machine used to make when it didn't like the fabric. "I see a linked account authorization," he said. "Set up last week." He turned the screen slightly toward us, and I caught our names swimming in black letters. "Who authorized it?" Mark asked, his voice steady in a way that made me proud and sad at once. "Digital token match. Your spouse," Ben replied. "It uses a household consent clause for expediency." He looked up, practiced sympathy ready, like a box of tissues positioned in advance. "It's common. Couples streamline." "Streamline," I repeated, "like a river wearing down a rock." "What are the terms?" Mark asked, and his hand found the edge of the table, knuckles pale. Ben scrolled, frowned. "A bridge facility," he said slowly. "Secured by a collateral statement referencing Unit 4B. High interest with a penalty after 90 days. There's also an escalation clause if residency is deemed unstable." He squinted at the screen, then at me. "This part is unusual. A contact of record listed as E. Clark, co-occupant, for notice of risk. Not guarantor," he added quickly, seeing my face change, "but it ensures communications reach the household." "A humiliation clause," I translated in my head, "the kind that ensures, if the house catches fire, your neighbors smell the smoke first." "Can we reverse it?" Mark asked. "Can we decouple the collateral?" Ben made the apologetic face of a man who has said no so many times he tries to make it sound like, "not yet." "You'd need to speak with the lender," he said, "but you can put a hold on further link transfers until all account holders consent. I can do that now." "Do it," Mark said. I nodded. Ben clicked. The machine hummed, a small, mundane act that felt like rowing against a current. When we stepped back onto the street, the crisp air had sharpened. "She exposed us," Mark said. The words came out flat, like boards stacked for rebuilding. "She exposed you," I corrected gently, "and used me as a shade." We walked the long way home, past the park I had chosen in my daydreams, where a mother in a red coat was teaching a child to throw bread, not too hard, to the pond's winterboard ducks. I felt suddenly ancient and exactly my age. "You know what you need to do," I said. "You need to stand up in your own house." He nodded, a movement that included regret and resolve, then slipped his arm through mine like he used to when the curb looked taller than his legs. Back in the lobby, Mrs. Novak was pinning a note to the corkboard. "Yoga, Tues, Thurs, beginner's welcome." She glanced at our faces and didn't ask. "Nameplate forms are on the counter," she said instead. I took one. The paper was thin, flimsy even, but it steadied me. In the elevator, the mirror showed me. I tucked a wisp of hair behind my ear and met my own eyes until they looked like mine again. The apartment door was ajar. Laura's voice floated out, bright and brittle, speaking to someone on speakerphone. "Absolutely temporary. We were misled about the addendum. There will be a correction." She turned as we entered, and her smile was the kind you show to waiters you don't tip. "I hope you enjoyed your little outing," she said. "I took the liberty of reorganizing the second room." The second room, my room. I walked down the hall and stopped. She hadn't unpacked. She had erased. The crochet blanket had been folded and wedged into the bottom of the wardrobe. The frames were stacked with their glass facing inward, as if they were ashamed. The leaves curtains were pulled tight like a mouth saying no. On the bed lay the photo of Mark at 8, the corner snapped. "You're not subtle," I said quietly. Subtlety is for people who apologize, she answered. I prefer results. There are times when anger is a flame that burns the fingers of the person holding it, and times when it is a stove you cook on. I chose the stove. Mark and I placed a hold on link transfers, I said, and we saw the collateral clause. If a lender comes here to collect shame as interest, I will meet him at the door with paper and pen. Her eyes flickered. You went behind my back. No, I said. I walked in front of my face. Mark stepped into the doorway as if he had learned the architecture of thresholds. No more secrets, he said, and his voice was steady now. We call the lender, we ask for the terms, we unwind what can be unwound, and we respect the addendum. Mom stays. Laura's laugh this time had edges. Or we sell, he said, and even the refrigerator seemed to stop humming to hear him. We sell and start again without claws hidden in clauses. She stared at him, truly looked, as if she had discovered an extra floor in a house she thought she knew. You'd throw everything away for her? I'd throw away what isn't ours, he said. The doorbell rang, not the soft chime of neighbors, a fist on a plate. Laura flinched. I went to answer it because older women know that sometimes the bravest thing is simply to open a door. 2 men stood in the hall, jackets too tight across their shoulders, smiles polished to a bureaucratic shine. One held a clipboard, the other held a calm he didn't own. Good afternoon, the clipboard said, though it was the man speaking. We're here regarding a bridge facility with Shoreline Capital. Are we speaking with Mrs. Laura Hayes? You are, Laura said crisply, stepping in front of me as if I were a stain to be blocked from view. Any issues can be discussed with me alone. The man's eyes slid past her to me, finding my years like a heat source. We also have a contact of record, he said. Ms. Evelyn Clark. He said my name like a test. I stepped forward into my own answer. That's me. He brightened with professional relief. Excellent. We've issued a routine notice, verification of co-occupant for risk assessment, just a signature to acknowledge awareness of collateral. He held out the clipboard. The paper looked ordinary, in the way weeds look like nothing until they crack a foundation. I didn't touch it. I don't sign traps, I said pleasantly. If you have questions about residency, our building manager can confirm. I gestured down the hall. She knows her addendums from her elbows. The second man's smile thinned. Refusal to acknowledge can accelerate fees. Acknowledging your existence is not the same as consenting to your appetite, I replied. Leave your card. Mark was beside me now, his shoulders squared. Any further contact goes through me, he said, and our counsel. Our counsel, I thought, not a threat, but a shape for the future. The men exchanged a look, then a card, and left with the defeated politeness of people whose usual trick didn't work. When the door shut, the apartment breathed again. Laura rounded on us, a storm with a face. You just made everything worse, she hissed. They will ruin our credit, our standing. They will not use me as a lever, I said, and they will not turn our threshold into a stage. I walked back to my room and began one by one to stand the frames upright, glass facing the light. I hung the jam-cheeked boy above the chair. The squeak in the bed frame complained and then settled. Mark stood in the doorway and watched me work, his mouth soft with something like gratitude. I'll call the agent, he said, and the notary. Do, I answered. Ask for words that won't run when it rains. I smoothed the crochet blanket and shook out the leaves curtains. They breathed again. Somewhere down the hall, Mrs. Novak's notice for beginner yoga waited for tax to hold it, and on the counter, the nameplate form lay as flimsy as courage, sometimes looks before it's used. I took a pen and wrote slowly, the letters that make me myself. When I finished, my phone buzzed again, this time a message from an unknown number. Call me. I handled your buyer's paperwork. There's something you should see. I stared at the screen until the words stopped swimming. Then I put on my shoes, the good ones, the ones that know how to carry a body forward, and felt the house tilt very slightly toward the truth. I sat staring at the unknown number on my phone until my reflection in the black screen looked like another woman, one braver than me, or maybe one who had already lost everything and so had nothing left to fear. I handled your buyer's paperwork. There's something you should see. The words refused to dissolve. They were heavier than the paper addendum in my handbag, sharper than Laura's insults, louder than Mark's quiet guilt. I pressed call back before doubt could pin me down. A man answered on the second ring, his voice quick, as though he lived on deadlines. Ms. Clark? I'm David Mercer, junior associate at Fairbanks Realty. You sold your flat through our office. Yes, I said. My fingers curled around the edge of the chair. And you handled the transfer? I prepared the file, he said. But when I double-checked yesterday for routine auditing, I noticed an addendum that was never part of your original contract. It was slipped in after signatures, digitally appended. My heart stuttered. What did it say? That the proceeds of your sale, your down payment, were to be held in escrow for household stabilization purposes, which essentially means your son and daughter-in-law can use the funds as collateral for unsecured debt. It's highly irregular. The room tilted. My sugar bowl on the shelf looked suddenly absurd, a chipped relic pretending to guard sweetness while thieves rearranged the pantry. Who authorized it? I whispered. On the file, Mrs. Laura Hayes. Not you, not your son. Forged or forced, I can't tell, but I pulled the metadata. The system logged the edit from her account. Behind me, Mark appeared in the doorway, eyes shadowed. Who is it? I covered the phone. The agent. There's more. David's voice softened, like he knew he was breaking something fragile. If you want this voided, you need to act quickly, before the lender ties it to their claim. I can send you the original draft and the altered one. Yes, I said. My voice surprised me by sounding like command. Send them. We ended the call. The email pinged my phone almost immediately. 2 attachments. I opened them side by side, and the difference glared at me in a single paragraph, squeezed between real clauses, like a thief hiding among mourners. Mark leaned over my shoulder. His face drained as he read. She used your money as bait. I touched his hand. Our money. Because what is mine has always been yours. That's the sin she never understood, how giving doesn't mean erasing. From the hall came the sharp click of heels. Laura stood there, arms folded, eyes narrowing at the glow of the screen. What are you plotting? She demanded. I lifted the phone so the paragraph shone in her direction. This. For the first time, she looked unsteady. You shouldn't pry into things you don't understand. I understand theft, I said calmly. I understand betrayal. Mark stepped forward. Laura, did you alter her sale contract? She laughed, brittle. Don't be ridiculous. Why would I? Because you were desperate, I interrupted, my voice cutting through hers like a cold wind. Because you thought age makes a woman blind. Because you wanted the house, but not the history that came with it. Silence. Heavy, ugly, undeniable. Mark pressed his palms into his temples, as though holding his... Then he whispered, Mom, she'll never forgive me for siding with you. You're not siding with me, I corrected gently. You're siding with truth. Forgiveness is her choice. Integrity is yours. He closed his eyes, as though the words hurt, but when he opened them again, there was resolve. Not an hour later, the knock came, not the polite rap of neighbors. It was harder, like debt collectors announcing their patience was gone. Mark rose at once, his face tense. I followed him to the door. 2 men again, the same from yesterday, jackets too neat, eyes too flat. Mr. Hayes, the taller one said smoothly, we trust you've had time to reconsider our request. A simple acknowledgement signature from Ms. Clark, and we'll be on our way. I stepped forward before Mark could speak, and as I told you, my pen doesn't sign traps. I will not acknowledge what I never consented to. The second man smiled thinly. Then you force us to escalate. Shoreline Capital does not enjoy messy cases. They prefer solutions. Then let them prefer honesty, I replied, voice steady, because I have the original draft of my sale contract and the altered version. Both are now in my possession. One shows my money was meant for a home. The other shows someone tampered with it. Which one do you think a court will prefer? The taller man's smile wavered. You wouldn't risk legal exposure. Too costly, too slow. Age has already taught me patience, I said, and I've survived costs worse than money. Mark's voice cut in stronger than I expected. Leave. Any further contact must go through our lawyer. For the first time, the men looked less sure. They exchanged a glance, handed over another stiff business card, and walked away without another word. When the door closed, I heard Laura's voice, sharp from behind her door. Do you see what you've done? You've provoked them. They'll ruin us. I turned, my chest rising with something hotter than anger, something that felt like clarity. No, Laura, you ruined yourself the moment you thought deceit could build a safe house. She burst into the living room, hair uncombed, eyes flashing. You think you're clever? You think this apartment is yours because of some dusty clause? You're a guest, Evelyn. You always will be. I walked to my room, pulled open the drawer, and lifted the envelope David had sent, the email printouts, the metadata logs, the proof. I held them high so both of them could see. A guest doesn't hold keys to the house, I said. A guest doesn't have her name carved into the contract. And a guest doesn't own the proof that her daughter-in-law lied. Her face paled. You wouldn't dare. I would, I said simply, and I will if you push me. The room fell still. Even the refrigerator seemed to hush. Mark cleared his throat. Laura, this ends now. Either we confront this together, honestly, or... His voice wavered, then steadied. Or there's no together left. Her eyes filled, not with sorrow, but with fury. You'd throw away your marriage for her? No, he said, for me, for what's right. For the first time, I saw her falter. Her hands shook and she sat heavily on the arm of the sofa, eyes darting like a trapped bird. You don't understand, she whispered. You don't know what I owe. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. Oh, a debt, deeper than any of us had guessed. I sank slowly into the chair opposite her. Then tell us, I said. Tell us the truth you've been running from. Because if we're to survive under one roof, the walls deserve honesty. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. And then, with a sound like fabric tearing, she whispered, it wasn't just a bridge loan. It was to cover something else. Something I never told Mark. Mark's face drained. What? She swallowed, hands clutching her knees. Before we married, I invested poorly. A friend convinced me. I thought I could double our savings. Instead, I lost everything. And the lender, Shoreline, has been circling ever since. If they declare me insolvent, they'll strip us bare. That's why I needed your money, Evelyn, to silence them. The confession landed heavy, like bricks poured into the room. I sat back, my chest tight, but my mind clear. At last, the truth had begun to show its face. You gambled with ghosts, I said quietly, and you thought you could bury the cost in my years. Her eyes glistened, but there was no apology there, only fear. Mark's hands shook as he pushed them through his hair. Laura, how could you hide this from me? She sobbed once, dry and jagged. Because I knew you'd never forgive me. Silence fell again, but it wasn't the silence of secrets anymore. It was the silence that comes when a house realizes its foundations have cracked. I placed the papers gently back into the envelope. Then this fight is bigger than us, I said, and it's only just begun. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Inside, 3 people sat in a room heavy with revelations. The shape of the future uncertain, the air charged with the promise of more battles to come. I have learned, over the long winter of my life, that truth arrives like weather. Sometimes it drifts in quietly, a fine snow you only notice when the sill turns white. Sometimes it hammers the roof. That morning, after Laura's confession, it did both. We sat in a triangle around the coffee table, the 3 of us holding different pieces of the same cold thing. Mark stared at his hands, as if they had written the wrong words in a book he loved. Laura wiped at eyes that refused to soften. I folded the envelope of proofs back into my bag, feeling the old steadiness I used to have when I managed a house on a salary that could not stretch, but somehow did because I learned where to stitch. We start with paper, I said. Paper got us into this. Paper will get us out. I called David, the junior associate, put him on speaker, and asked for an affidavit describing the tampering in plain language. He promised to draft it within the hour. Then I rang the notary. He remembered me. The woman who double-checked the elevator specifications for knees and boxes, he said, and agreed to meet after lunch to certify our copies. Mark pulled out his laptop and looked up legal aid. The closest clinic took walk-ins on Wednesdays. Today was Wednesday. Small mercies present themselves like chairs when your legs remember they are tired. Laura watched all of this with the wary disbelief of someone who thought bluster would be enough. You're wasting time, she said flatly. Shoreline doesn't care about your little papers. They leverage fear. They calculate. Then let them learn arithmetic, I replied, because they miscounted me. Before we left, I filled out the nameplate form Mrs. Novak had mentioned and slid it into the slot at her desk. She glanced at the handwriting and gave me a look that made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. We engrave on Fridays, she said. If you need it sooner, I know a man with a steady hand and a stubborn streak. I smiled. Stubbornness is our family crest. The clinic was a low building near the tram line, walls crowded with posters about tenants' rights and debt advice. In the waiting room, a young woman in a green sweater with an ink stain on the cuff called our name. Hayes Clark? I liked the sound. It felt like 2 ropes braided. She introduced herself as Priya, a staff attorney with a voice like a warm coat. We told her the whole story, letting the words find their footsteps in order. The addendum, the transfer, the bridge loan, the household stabilization clause. Laura had slid into my sale, the men at the door. Priya listened without interrupting, then asked precise questions, placing each answer like a tile. This is predatory lending behavior layered on fraud, she said finally. Your daughter-in-law's risk exposure is hers. What they're trying to do is conscript the household into an implied obligation by manufacturing acknowledgement. Good that you didn't sign. First, we file a police report for document tampering and fraud, at minimum to create a record. Second, we send a cease and desist to Shoreline and their collectors, demanding communications be in writing to council. Third, we notify the building of your protected residency status. Fourth, we alert your bank to freeze any authorizations linked to that escrow addendum. And fifth, we get you a temporary civil restraining order against harassment if those men return. Mark exhaled like someone surfacing. Can we do all that today? We can start, Priya said, smiling. And sometimes starting is most of the victory. She drafted letters while we sat. The tap-tap of her keyboard felt like hammers finding nails. She printed, we signed. She notarized what she could and prepared the rest for the notary we'd visit later. She also gave us a script for the police report and explained what to say and what not to say. Facts, not fury, she advised, looking at me with gentle humor, as if she knew I had both in stock. Outside, the wind had sharpened. We walked to the station, filed the report with a patient sergeant who squinted at the addendum and muttered, "People think paper doesn't bite." Back at the apartment, the hallway smelled faintly of bleach and something sweet. Someone had baked. On the corkboard beneath Mrs. Novak's yoga note, someone had taped a flyer. Swap. Basil cuttings for mending advice. Community advertises itself in small fonts. When we opened our door, the apartment had been tidied. Laura moves like a storm when she cleans. Cushions arranged like soldiers, surfaces wiped to the point of insult, all warmth organized out of sight. She stood by the window with her arms folded and the brittle calm of a person rehearsing lines. "While you were out," she said, "I spoke to the building's accountant. The escrow language is standard." "It's not," I said, placing Priya's letter on the table with the quiet force of a chess piece that ends a game. "And you will not speak to anyone on our behalf from now on." Mark put his keys down in the dish that had startled me the first night. The sound rang different today. He turned to Laura, not unkind, but unmoved. "I'm staying with Mom in the second room for a few days," he said, "until council tells us the safest way to proceed." She blinked. "In her room?" "Her room," he repeated, and the words were a wall going up. "I need to protect her and the papers, and myself, if I'm honest." He said that last part with a softness that made me want to cry and also clap. For a few hours, the house felt like a held breath. I made soup, chicken with lemon, the kind that convinces tired bones to keep touching each other. Mark ate quietly, then napped, the fight leaving him the way a tide leaves a shore. I sat by my window and watched clouds herd themselves toward evening. It would have been almost peaceful if not for the knock at 5. It was not Shoreline. It was a woman with a clipboard and a smile trained to be reassuring. "Ms. Clark," she said, "I'm Ruth from Adult Protective Services. We received an anonymous call expressing concern about your well-being, possible financial exploitation, and coercion. May I come in?" The anonymous call walked into the hallway in bare feet and a robe. Laura. She had arranged her face into worry. "Yes, please," she said quickly. "I'm so glad you're here. It's all very distressing. My mother-in-law is confused and my husband is easily manipulated. She insists on signing things. Not another step," I said, and surprised myself with the steadiness of my tone. "Ma'am," I turned to the worker, "you are welcome to come in. You will speak to me alone first, then to my son, then," I added, if appropriate, to my daughter-in-law. Ruth hesitated, then nodded. "Procedure has a rhythm older than panic. We sat at the table. I offered tea. She took notes with a pen that squeaked. I told her the facts: the sale, the addendum I did not authorize, the bridge loan, the collectors, our visit to legal aid, the police report filed that afternoon. I showed her Priya's letters and the notary appointment slip. I did not raise my voice. I did not editorialize. When she asked if I felt safe, I answered carefully. I feel safe with my son. I feel unsafe with predatory lenders. I feel uncertain with a daughter-in-law who changed legal documents without consent. She looked at me over her glasses, weighing age against coherence, history against this morning. "Do you need emergency accommodations?" she asked. "I need my nameplate engraved," I said, and she laughed before she could stop herself. She spoke to Mark next. He was clear, ashamed where appropriate, firm where necessary. When it was Laura's turn, boneless charm returned to her voice. She described me as volatile, obsessed with control, confused about finances. She told Ruth I had demanded to sleep in their marital bed for authority, a detail so absurd my mouth actually fell open in the kitchen. Ruth asked if there were any recordings, any texts, any witnesses. Laura said there were many distressed neighbors. At that, Ruth glanced toward the door. "We can ask the building manager for corroboration," she said. Laura's eyes blinked too fast. Mrs. Novak arrived like a summons. She stood with her hands clasped, gray bob neat, posture like a verdict. "We have cameras in the lobby," she said calmly. "They show Ms. Clark carrying boxes into 4B and greeting the movers. They show Ms. Hayes meeting two men from a collection agency and attempting to redirect deliveries to storage. They also show Ms. Hayes telling me, and I quote, 'We need to make the old lady look unstable so the building will back us up.'" I wrote that sentence down, she added, producing a small spiral notepad with the pride of a woman who knows paper's appetite. Ruth wrote quickly, eyes flicking to Laura, who had turned the color of milk before it boils. "Thank you," Ruth said. "We'll close this as an unfounded report and attach a caution about retaliatory claims." She stood. "Ms. Clark, if those gentlemen return, call the police. Mr. Hayes, I recommend securing important documents off-site. Ms. Hayes." She paused, compassion and censure negotiating space in her face. "I suggest counseling." After the door closed behind Ruth, the apartment's silence returned. But it was a different silence than before, like a stage after the audience has applauded and gone. Work done. Brooms to be fetched. Laura's shoulders sagged, fury replaced by something emptier. "You'll ruin me," she whispered. "Everything I did because I was afraid." "Fear," I said quietly, "doesn't excuse theft. It explains it. There's a difference." I reached for my coat. "We have an appointment with the notary." The sky had turned the lavender color it saves for evenings when people need to believe in gentleness. At the notary's office, a clock ticked like a small, honest heart. We signed affidavits, we stamped, we made copies. The notary stapled with ceremony. "This will hold," he said. "It's a good net." On our way back, we stopped by Mrs. Novak's desk. There, beside the nameplate machine, lay a thin brass strip warming under the desk lamp. It said E. Clark, 4B. The letters were modest and crisp. Not a banner, just a fact. Mrs. Novak slid it across. "The man with the steady hand worked fast," she said. I ran my thumb over the groove of the sea, felt the reality of its little canyon. Mark took the strip and smiled, the kind of smile that starts at the edges of the mouth and goes inward, mending something as it travels. When we reached the apartment, a faint smell of cloves met us. Someone in the building was making mulled tea. It made the corridor feel briefly like a ship where everyone shares weather. On the floor before our door lay an envelope without a stamp. Inside, a single printed page. Notice of residency review, potential breach. Filed not by the building. Filed by a private mediator retained by Laura. She had done it while we were out. Hired a firm to challenge my right to stay by citing household disharmony and health concerns, the same lies APS had just closed. I looked at Mark. He looked at me. Facts, not fury, he said, echoing Priya. I nodded and exhaled. Then I slid the brass nameplate into my pocket and felt its weight like a key. The weather outside could do what it liked. In the morning, my name would be on the mailbox, and tonight I would sleep in a room that had remembered me, while the next round of truth gathered itself like a storm just beyond the horizon, deciding which roof to test first. The envelope on the floor still lay open on the table, its single page, notice of residency review, sitting there like a snake, pretending to sleep. I couldn't stop staring at it. A mediator hired by Laura, trying once again to push me out, this time with official-looking words instead of slammed doors. Mark sat across from me, his face drawn. He traced the edge of the paper with one finger, then looked up. She won't stop, Mom. She'll keep finding ways. Even if we win one battle, she'll start another. I nodded slowly. People who are afraid of losing everything will claw at anyone near them. Fear makes them creative, but fear also makes them sloppy. I pulled the brass nameplate from my pocket, held it up to the lamplight, and laid it gently beside the notice. The contrast was almost funny. Flimsy paper versus solid metal, lies versus engraving. Laura emerged from the bedroom then, dressed sharply as if going to work, though I knew her schedule. She saw the page on the table and the nameplate gleaming beside it. Her eyes flickered, first at the paper, then at me. Good, she said. You've read it. Maybe now you'll understand you can't just plant yourself in the middle of our... I woke with the first light, heart racing, and sat upright until I heard the rustle of life in the apartment. At breakfast, Mark had already made coffee. He set the mug in front of me, the steam curling like a promise. I called Priya, he said. She's ready to file an injunction to block the mediator's notice until the fraud case is examined. Good, I said, wrapping my hands around the warmth. But it won't stop Laura from trying something new. As if summoned, she emerged again, this time calm, collected, carrying her phone. You think you've won? She said evenly. You haven't. I still have rights as Mark's wife. And if it comes to choosing between us, he'll have to decide. Mark stood tall, shoulders back. I already did. Her face twisted, disbelief giving way to something darker. You'll regret this, she hissed. I watched her retreat again, but this time something in me had shifted. Fear no longer pressed on my chest. Instead, there was clarity, sharp as glass. I wasn't fighting for scraps of dignity anymore. I was fighting for a place in the story I had helped build, with my money, my years, my love. The brass nameplate still lay on the table. I picked it up, felt its weight, and smiled faintly. Tomorrow it would be fixed to the mailbox, a small, stubborn truth no notice could erase. And deep inside, I knew the storm wasn't over. But neither was I. The day the nameplate was fixed to the mailbox, I stood in the lobby and watched the man with the steady hand press it into place. The sound of the tiny screws tightening was like a heartbeat, metal into metal, certainty into stone. There, he said, stepping back. My name shone in brass, E. Clark, 4B. Not a decoration, not a courtesy, but a fact. Neighbors passed, some glancing, some smiling. One woman, carrying a toddler on her hip, nodded at me. "Welcome," she said simply. That word, welcome, rang louder than Laura's insults, louder even than the knock of Shoreline's men. For a moment I felt rooted again, like a tree that refuses to bow though storms snap its branches. When I returned upstairs, Laura was waiting. She had seen the plate. Her lips were pressed so tightly they looked bloodless. "Enjoy your little victory," she said. "Brass won't protect you from the truth review. They'll strip it off as soon as they see what you really are." I set down my shopping bag, calm as I could manage. "The difference between brass and paper, Laura, is that brass doesn't tear when the wind blows, and neither do I." Mark came in behind me, carrying more groceries, his shoulders tense. He looked at Laura, then at me, and without hesitation said, "Mom, show her what came this morning." I opened my bag and pulled out an envelope from Priya, our attorney. Inside was the preliminary injunction stamped by the court. It blocked any residency review until the fraud investigation was complete. The ink was fresh, the authority solid. I laid it on the table. Laura's face drained. "You went to court already?" Mark's voice was steady. "We don't sit still and hope anymore. We act." Her eyes narrowed. "So it's war then?" I met her gaze. "No, it's defense. War is what you started when you turned lies into contracts." She stormed into the bedroom, slamming the door so hard a frame rattled loose from the wall. I picked it up carefully, the picture of Mark as a boy with jam on his cheek, and set it back upright. The next days blurred into strategy. Priya coordinated with David, who confirmed the tampered sale file. Mrs. Novak printed lobby camera stills, each one capturing Laura redirecting movers and arguing with the collectors. Even the movers themselves signed statements. Bit by bit, the blanket of proof grew thicker. But Shoreline wasn't finished. They sent another pair of men one evening, this time smoother, wearing smiles like polished coins. They asked for friendly clarification, hinting that familial cooperation could reduce penalties. I stepped into the doorway, the injunction in hand. "You can smile at the brass plate on the mailbox on your way out," I told them. "That's the only clarification you'll get here." They left, but their eyes promised they'd be back. Later that night, I found Mark sitting in the dark living room, staring at nothing. "She was my wife," he whispered. "I wanted to build a future with her, and now every day feels like pulling nails from rotten wood." I sat beside him, resting my old hand on his. "Then don't pull them alone. Let me help. I've been mending roofs longer than she's been writing lies." He leaned his head against mine for a moment, and I felt the boy he used to be, frightened but still brave enough to trust. The following morning, Laura made her move. She dressed in her finest suit, took her phone and a folder, and announced she was leaving for a meeting. Mark asked where. She smiled thinly. "Someplace where truth isn't twisted by old women with grudges." Then she left, the door slamming behind her like punctuation. Mark and I exchanged a look. He whispered, "She's going to the mediator anyway." I nodded. "Let her. She'll walk into a room armed with stories. We'll walk in with proof." Sure enough, that afternoon, a letter arrived, summons to a preliminary hearing with the mediator. The date, 3 days from now. I held the letter, the paper trembling only slightly in my hand. "This is it," I said. "The stage she wanted. The place where lies and truth will wrestle in front of witnesses." Mark looked at me, weary but resolute. Do you think we can win? I placed the injunction, the affidavits, and the photos on the table, one by one, like cards in a careful game. We don't have to win the whole war yet, I told him. We just have to hold the line long enough for truth to dig in. Lies collapse under their own weight. They always do. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought of my husband, long gone, of the flat I had sold, of the chipped sugar bowl and the crochet blanket, and the years of work that had brought me here. And I whispered into the dark, "Stand with me tomorrow," because I knew the storm's center hadn't come yet. The mediator's hearing would be where everything cracked open, and I needed every ounce of strength, every page of proof, every shred of dignity to face it. The house was quiet, but I could almost hear the walls leaning in, ready to listen. The hearing room smelled faintly of dry paper and coffee left too long on a hot plate. A narrow window gave the winter light a quiet place to land. Priya sat on my left, dignified in a navy cardigan, notes stacked like bricks. Mark sat on my right, fingers interlaced, eyes clear, in that new way that made me both proud and a little sad. Across from us, Laura smoothed her skirt and stared at her reflection in a blackened TV screen as if it might testify on her behalf. The mediator, a woman with silver hair swept into a careful knot, introduced herself as Ms. Hart. "We are here," she said gently, "to clarify facts and prevent harm." Facts and harm. Two weights, one scale. Laura started first. She spoke quickly, professionally, the way people speak when they've rehearsed not just their lines, but everyone else's too. I was manipulative. I had inserted myself into a young marriage. I was unstable around finances. I had weaponized sentiment. She called me the elderly, a phrase that tried to turn a person into a category. Ms. Hart listened, pen ticking. When Laura was done, Priya slid forward a single page. "Before we respond," she said calmly, "please mark Exhibit A, temporary injunction, restraining any residency review pending fraud investigation." The stamp in the corner looked like a small red sun. We moved through the exhibits, like careful steps across a river. David's affidavit describing the tampered escrow addendum, the metadata logs showing Laura's login and timestamp, the bank record of the transfer to Shoreline, the building's camera stills capturing Laura instructing the movers to send my boxes to storage and accepting the collectors in the lobby. Mrs. Novak's written statement, word for word, her little notepad line, "We need to make the old lady look unstable." Even a short email from Adult Protective Services, anonymous complaint unfounded, retaliatory indications noted. Laura tried to laugh them thin. "Taken out of context," she said, "routine flexibility, family dynamics, misunderstanding." But context is the thing that papers make when they stand shoulder to shoulder. Priya's voice stayed soft. "And Exhibit H," she added, placing my original sale contract beside the altered one, demonstrates the insertion of a clause expressly enabling the misuse of Ms. Clark's proceeds for unsecured debt, without her consent. Ms. Hart's pen stopped. She looked up, not at Laura, not at me, but at Mark. "And you, sir?" she asked. "What do you understand now?" Mark inhaled, as if his ribs had been binding him for years and someone had finally cut the laces. "I understand my mother gave us money to build a home, not to buy silence. I understand my wife changed papers and invited wolves to our door. I understand fear drove her hands, but fear didn't sign for me. And I understand what I have to do to protect my mother and myself." Silence folded itself neatly and set itself in the middle of the table. Ms. Hart rearranged the exhibits into two stacks. On one side, she said, tapping the proof, we have documents that hold together. On the other, assertions that fall apart when touched. She turned to Laura. My recommendation is immediate cessation of attempts to disturb Ms. Clark's residency. A written acknowledgement that the clause guaranteeing her room stands. A commitment to remove her proceeds from collateral and to cooperate with any investigation of the altered escrow. Failure to comply will be documented for the court. Laura's face cracked then, not into tears, but into the expression people wear when they realize the door they've been pushing is actually a wall. If she stays, she whispered hoarsely, looking past me to Mark, I go. She wanted it to sound like a threat. It sounded like surrender. Mark didn't flinch. Then you go, he said quietly. If you can't live with truth, you can't live here. The hearing ended not with a gavel, but with signatures. Ms. Hart's recommendations would be filed. Priya would follow through. Shoreline would receive the cease and desist, written in a tone that suggested the next letter would have a judge's name on it. We stepped into the hallway where the light from that narrow window felt suddenly generous. Laura didn't come home with us. She packed while we were gone, quickly, messily, selectively. The apartment looked like a mouth that had lost a tooth. The shape remained. The ache was new. She left a note, one sentence. You chose her. I folded it once and set it under the sugar bowl with the chip that looks like a grin. I'm old enough to know how grief and relief can share a teacup without spilling. Days followed that were not triumphant so much as honest. Shoreline tried one more time, a lawyerly email offering amicable resolution if we would cooperate. Priya's reply used words so calm they sounded like sleep. No. The bank reversed the linked authorizations. David helped file the formal complaint against the altered escrow. The brokerage opened an internal investigation. Mrs. Novak organized a potluck in the common room for new and old neighbors, she said, looking at me over the sign-up sheet until we both smiled. The beginner's yoga started on Tuesday. I did not bend low, but I stood taller. One evening, after the last of the winter's sun had walked itself along the floorboards and curled up behind the sofa, Mark brought out a shoebox from the top of the wardrobe. I used to keep everything that scared me in here, he said with a crooked smile. Letters I couldn't answer, bills I didn't understand, decisions I didn't want to make. He handed me the box. Inside lay the mediator's summons, now stamped satisfied, the collector's cards with initials scrawled across them, void, the printed APS closure, and at the very bottom, the snapshot of him, 8 years old, jam on his cheek, his eyes daring the camera to love him as much as I did. Let's keep only what's worth remembering, I said. We put the photo on the wall, the papers in a folder labeled with a word I like. Finished. Winter softened around the edges. The pond in the park remembered how to be a mirror again. The brass nameplate on the mailbox dulled in a way that made it more beautiful. Metal learning its place, becoming part of the building's weather instead of arguing with it. I planted basil on the windowsill from a cutting I swapped with a neighbor, and when it took, I sent back crochet, mending for her grandson's sweater. Small economies of care, the kind that never make headlines and always remake homes. It would be a pretty ending to say Laura apologized, that she came back with a different heart, and we all sat at a table where the soup tasted only of cumin. That didn't happen. She sent an email through her lawyer proposing a separation. Mark replied through counsel, and then sat at the edge of my bed with his head in his hands. I failed, he said. I didn't see who she was.